Greetings, my friends. Different video this time. I'm not going to have my little camera cameo sitting there. I'm showing you the actual verbiage here so you can listen, and those who can't hear, because there are many who can't hear, have hearing difficulties, can read, and those who can't read can hear, because people have different issues going on. I have talked about the title of this article is The Essence of Evil, Sex with Children Has Become Big Business in America. A little bit was cut off because I had to get just the text for you from this website. It's called Anti-Media, and I give them all the credit for this this terrible thing that needs to be talked about. I have done my job over the years. All glory to God, never ending to me. This is going to be a pretty long video, by the way. And I've warned about sex slavery in America. I've warned about the Super Bowl being the biggest sex slavery, sexual perversion holiday around every year. And that's why I refuse to watch a Super Bowl. And I have for about the last decade refused to watch it, because I won't watch things that that revolve around children being sexually exploited and molested and raped. But see, America doesn't care. The average Christian could care less. The average non-Christian could care less that America is a filthy, festering, wicked cesspool, a hellhole that has the most perversion on the entire planet, has the most evil things going on. It's anti-Semitic. Even the church hates Israel now. The non-church hates Israel. You got all kinds of sexual perversion. You got hundreds of millions of babies being murdered in the womb. You've got all kinds of perversion and filth and wickedness and evil and a watered-down garbage hole church that preaches lies from the pits of hell. America is a garbage pit. It's toast. And this is the last straw to me, as far as I'm concerned, the way these children are treated. And see, unless you have children or grandchildren, I'm talking about little boys and little girls. They're all being trafficked now in America. If you don't care, you could care less. I care about every single child on this planet, including America and the rest of the world, like Christ cares for them. And I will keep putting the word out. If you don't put it out, if you don't share this video, if you don't don't show Christ you care and share and get the word out to those who need to hear it, then that's on you, my friends. That's on you. It's pathetic, and it's just weak, and it's just garbage. So let's go ahead and go through the article. I'm going to read. You read along and listen, and let's go ahead and go through what's happening. Again, this was written by John Whitehead. Children, young girls, some as young as 9 years old, are being bought and sold. Actually, some as young as 5 years old now are being bought and sold for sex in America. The average age for a young woman being sold for sex is now 13 years old. This is America's dirty little secret. Sex trafficking, especially when it comes to the buying and selling of young girls, has become big business in America, the fastest growing business in organized crime, and the second most lucrative commodity traded illegally after guns and drugs. As investigative journalist Amy Fine Collins notes, it's become more lucrative and much safer to sell malleable teens and young children down to 5 years old than drugs or guns. A pound of heroin or an AK-47 can be retailed once, but a young girl or boy can be sold 10 to 15 times a day, and a righteous pimp confiscates 100% of not her, but their earnings. Consider this. Every 2 minutes, a child is exploited in the sex industry. America is terrible, my friends. According to USA Today, adults purchase children for sex at least 2.5 million times a year in the U.S. alone. Who buys a child for sex? Otherwise ordinary men from all walks of life. They could be your coworker, doctor, pastor, spouse, writes journalist Tim Swarns, who spent more than a year investigating the sex trade in America. In Georgia alone, it's estimated that 7,200 men, half of them in their 30s, seek to purchase sex with adolescent girls and boys each month, averaging roughly 300 a day. This is just the girls' numbers. The boys make it even more than that. On average, a child might be raped by 6,000 men during a 5-year period of servitude. It is estimated that at least 100,000 children, girls and boys, here's where the boys are seen now, are bought and sold for sex in the U.S. every year, with as many as 300,000 children in danger of being trafficked each year. Some of these children are forcefully abducted, others are runaways, still others are sold in the system by relatives and acquaintances. Human trafficking, the commercial sexual exploitation of American children and women via the internet, strip clubs, escort services, or street prostitution is on its way to becoming one of the worst crimes in America, said prosecutor Kristen Patel. This is an industry that revolves around cheap sex on the fly with young girls and women and boys who are sold to 50 men each day for $25 apiece, while their handlers make $150,000 to $200,000 per child each year. And this is not a problem found only in big cities. It's happening everywhere right under our noses in suburbs, cities, and towns across the nation. As Ernie Allen of the National Center for Missing Children and Exploited Children points out, the only way not to find this in an American city is simply not to look for it, which again, hardly anybody does. They don't care. Don't fool yourselves into believing this is merely a concern for lower income communities or immigrants. It's not. It's estimated there are 100,000 to 150,000 underage child sex workers in the U.S. These girls and boys aren't volunteering to be sex slaves. They're being lured, forced, trafficked into it. In most cases, they have no choice. In order to avoid detection, in some cases aided and abetted by the police, and cater to male buyers' demand for sex with different women, pimps in the gangs and crime syndicates they work for have turned sex trafficking into a highly mobile enterprise with trafficked girls, boys, and women constantly being moved from city to city, state to state, country to country. For instance, the Baltimore-Washington area, referred to as the Circuit, with its I-95 corridor dotted with rest stops, bus stations, and truck stops, is a hub for the sex trade. No doubt about it, this is highly profitable, highly organized, and highly sophisticated sex trafficking business that operates in towns large and small, ranking in upwards of $9.5 billion a year in the U.S. alone by abducting and selling young girls and boys for sex. Every year, the girls and boys being bought and sold get younger and younger. The average age of those being trafficked is 13. Yet, as the head of the group that combats trafficking pointed out, let's think about what that means. That means there are children younger than 13, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, even 5, 6, 7-year-olds, my friends. For every 10 women rescued, there are 50 to 100 more women who are brought in by the traffickers. Unfortunately, they're not 18 to 20-year-olds anymore. No, the 25-year-old victim of trafficking. They're minors, as young as 13 or even younger, who are being trafficked. They're little girls and little boys. So where does appetite for young girls and young boys come from? Look around you. Young girls have been sexualized for years now. In music videos, on billboards, television ads, and clothing stores, marketeers have created a demand for young flesh and a ready supply of over-sexualized children. All it takes is one look at MySpace photos of teens to see examples. If they aren't imitating porn they've actually seen, they're imitating the porn-inspired images and poses they've absorbed elsewhere, writes Jessica Bennett for Newsweek. Latex, corsets, stripper heels, once the fashion of porn stars, have made their way into middle and high school, even elementary school. This is what Bennett refers to as the pornification of a generation. In a market that sells high heels for babies and thongs for tweens, it doesn't take a genius to see that sex, if not porn, has invaded our lives, concludes Bennett. Whether we welcome it or not, television brings it into our living rooms and the web brings it into our bedrooms. According to a 2007 study from the University of Alberta, as many as 90% of boys and 70% of girls aged 13 to 14, it goes much younger than that too, my friends. I've heard as young as 5, have accessed sexually explicit content at least once. In other words, the culture is grooming these young people to be preyed upon by sexual predators, and then we wonder why our young women are being preyed upon, trafficked, and abused. Social media makes it all too easy, as one news center reported. Finding girls is easy for pimps. They look on MySpace, Facebook, and other social networks. They and their assistants cruise malls, high schools, middle schools, even elementary schools. Don't be fooled. They pick them up at bus stops, on the trolley. Girl-to-girl recruitment sometimes happens. Foster homes and youth shelters have also become prime targets for traffickers. Rarely do these girls enter into prostitution voluntarily. Many start out as runaways or throwaways, only to be snatched up by pimps or larger sex rings. Others persuaded to meet up with a stranger after interacting online through one of the many social networking sites find themselves quickly initiated into their new lives as sex slaves. These are actual stories now. Debbie, a straight-A student who belonged to a close-knit Air Force family living in Phoenix, Arizona, is an example of this trading of flesh. Debbie was 15 when she was snatched from her driveway by an acquaintance friend. Forced into a car, Debbie was bound and taken to an unknown location, held at gunpoint, and raped by multiple men. She was then crammed into a small dog kennel and forced to eat dog biscuits. Debbie's captors advertised her services on Craigslist. Those who responded were often married with children, and the money that Debbie earned for sex was given to her kidnappers. The gang raping continued. After searching the apartment where Debbie was held captive, police finally found Debbie stuffed in a drawer under a bed. Her harrowing ordeal lasted for 40 days. 40 days. While Debbie was fortunate enough to be rescued, others are not so lucky. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children, nearly 800,000 children go missing every year. That's almost 2,200 a day, my friends. With a growing demand for sexual slavery and an endless supply of girls and women who can be targeted for abduction, this is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. Those For those trafficked, it's a nightmare from beginning to end. Those being sold for sex have an average life expectancy of 7 years. Can you believe that? And those years are a living nightmare of endless rape, forced drugging, humiliation, degradation, threats, disease, pregnancies, abortions, miscarriages, torture, pain, and always a constant fear of being killed or worse, having those you love hurt or killed. Peter Landesman paints the full horrors of life for those victims of the sex trade in his New York Times article, The Girls Next Door. Andrea told me that she and other children she was held with were frequently beaten to keep them off balance and obedient. Sometimes they were videotaped while being forced to have sex with adults or one another. Often, she said, she was asked to play roles, the therapist, patient, or the obedient daughter. Her cell of sex traffickers offered 3 age ranges of sex partners, toddler to age 4, 5 to 12 in teens as well. Can you hear that? 4, 5 to 12 in teens as well, is what she called a damage group. In the damage group, they can hit you, do anything they want to do, she explained. Though sex always hurts when you're little, it's always violent. Everything was much more painful once you were placed in the damage group. What Andrea described next shows you how depraved some portions of the American society have become. They'd get you hungry, then to train you to have oral sex. They put honey on a man's penis. For the littlest kids, you had to learn not to gag, and they would push things in you so you would open up better, and it would be easier for men to be able to enter you for sex. This is horrendous. We learn responses like if they wanted us to be sultry or sexy or scared. Most of them wanted you scared. When I got older, I teach young kids how to float away so things didn't hurt. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents at the cybercrimes in Fairfax, Virginia, report that when it comes to sex, the appetites of many Americans have now changed. What was once considered abnormal is now the norm. These agents are tracking a clear spike in the demand for hardcore pornography on the internet. As one agent noted, we've become desensitized by the soft stuff. Now we need a harder and harder hit. This trend is reflected by the treatment many of the girls receive at the hands of the drug traffickers and the men who purchased them. Peter Landesman interviewed Rosario, a Mexican woman who had been trafficked to New York, held captive for a number of years. She said in America, we had special jobs, oral sex, anal sex, often with many men. Sex is now more adventurous, harder. A common thread woven through most survivors' experience is being forced to go without sleep or food until they've met their sex quota of at least 40 men. One woman recounts how her trafficker made her lie face down on the floor when she was pregnant and then literally jumped on her back, forcing her to miscarry. Holly Olsen Smith was abducted when she was 14 years old, raped, and then forced to prostitute herself. Her pimp, when brought to trial, was only made to serve a year in prison. A year, my friends, and this girl and all the rest are serving a lifetime in hell. Barbara Maya was repeatedly sold between traffickers, abused, shot, stabbed, raped, kidnapped, trafficked, beaten, and jailed all before she was 18 years old. I had a quota I was supposed to fill every night. If I didn't fill that amount of money, I'd get beat, thrown down the stairs. He beat me once with wire coat hangers, the kind you hang up clothes. He straightened it out, and my whole back was bleeding. As David McSwain recounts in a chilling piece for the Herald Tribune, in Oakland Park, industrial Fort Lauderdale suburb, federal agents in 2011 encountered a brothel operated by a married couple inside the Boom Boom Room, as it was known. Customers paid a fee and were given a condom and a timer and left alone with one of the brothel's 8 teenagers, children as young as 13. A 16-year-old foster child testified he acted as security, while a 17-year-old told a federal judge she was forced to have sex with as many as 20 men a night. You get that? One particular sex trafficking ring catered specifically to migrant workers employed seasonally on farms throughout the southeastern states, especially the Carolinas and Georgia. Although it's a flourishing business in every state in the country, traffickers transport the women from farm to farm, where migrant workers would line up outside shacks, as many as 30 at a time, to have sex with them before they were transported to yet another farm, and the process would begin over and over and over again. Imagine this life. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Are you listening to this? Are you going to share this and get the word out? This growing evil is, for all intents and purposes, out in the open. Trafficked women and children are advertised on the internet, transported on the interstate, and bought and sold in swanky hotels. Indeed, I make it clear in my book, Battlefield America, The War on the American People, the government's war on sex trafficking, much like the government's war on terrorism, drugs, and crime, has become a perfect excuse for inflicting more police state tactics, police checkpoints, searches, surveillance, and heightened security on a vulnerable public while doing little to make our communities safer. So what can you do? Educate yourself and your children about this growing menace in our communities. Stop feeding the monster. Sex trafficking is part of a larger continuum in America that runs the gamut from homelessness, poverty, and self-esteem issues to sexualized television, the glorification of a pimp hoe culture that is often referred to as a pornification of America and a billion-dollar sex industry built on the back of pornography, music, entertainment, etc. This epidemic is largely one of our own making, especially in a corporate age where the value placed on human life takes a backseat to profit. It is estimated that the porn industry brings in more money than Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Yahoo. Do you got that? Call on your city councils, elected officials, and police departments to make the battle against sex trafficking a top priority, more so even than the so-called war on terror and drugs and the militarization of law enforcement. Stop prosecuting adults for victimless crimes, such as growing lettuce in their front yard. Focus on putting away the pimps and buyers who victimize these young women. Finally, the police need to do a better job of training, identifying, and responding to these issues. Communities and social services need to do a better job of protecting runaways, who are the primary targets of traffickers. Legislators needed to pass legislation aimed at prosecuting traffickers and Johns, the buyers who drive the demand for sex slaves. Hotels need to stop enabling these traffickers by providing them with rooms and cover for their dirty deeds. That so many women and children continue to be victimized and brutalized and treated like human cargo is due to three things. One, a consumer demand that is increasingly lucrative for everyone involved except the victims. Two, a level of corruption so invasive on both the local and international scale, there's little hope of working through the established channels for change. And three, an eerie silence from individuals who fail to speak out against such atrocities. But the truth is that we are all guilty of contributing to this human suffering. The traffickers are guilty. Consumers are guilty. The corrupt law enforcement officials are guilty. The women's group who do nothing are guilty. The foreign peacekeepers and aid workers who contribute to the demand for sex slaves are guilty. Most of all, every individual who does not raise a hue and cry over the atrocities being committed against children, women, and children in almost every nation around the globe, including the United States, is guilty. That's it, my friends. That's the end of the story. You're either going to get out and you're going to share the truth, you're going to warn people about this, and you're going to tell them about it. It breaks my heart to read this filth and have to share it with you. You're going to keep turning your head, put it back in the sand like an ostrich, and not care and answer to Jesus Christ on Judgment Day for failing to have the backbone to stand up for the little ones that he loves so much. The rapture is about to happen any second of any day, my friends. Jesus Christ is going to take his bride home, and those who are left behind in the tribulation and great tribulation, including all the backslidden Christians, will be here for 7 years of pure hell where God's going to rip this world apart. And there's no reason to go through all that at all. Jesus Christ is your only hope. He's giving you a way out. And yes, you have to repent of your sins after you're saved, Christians. Hundreds of scriptures say so. Believe what you want to believe. Eternal security is a lie from the pits of hell. If you'd like prayer for anything, pray the prayer to the 6 steps I have in the box below the video. No one's guaranteed more time in your life. If you'd like prayer, contact me. I pray for you every day. Again, show Jesus Christ you care. Share. Help me get the word out. And look up true Christians. Our redemption draweth nigh. We fly soon. May God bless you. Share this video. Get the word out. Bye.